So, dear audience, I would like to remind you that today we have an opportunity to have translation of the seminar, of the lecture, so that you can choose the channel that you prefer on the bottom panel of your screen. If you wish the English channel, choose English. If you wish to use Ukrainian channel, please use Ukrainian. Okay, I suggest we start our today's meeting, and I would like to start by introducing our lecturers. Today we have two lecturers, and we do this in partnership with UNDP and with the International Renaissance Foundation, and I would like to give the floor to our moderator today, Lilette Bradis, and she will introduce our speakers and give a few more details about the lecture that we will have today.
Thank you, Margot, and welcome everyone. And indeed, welcome to our special guests today. We are quite excited that we have this cooperation going. It's the first Ro3kvit lecture that we work in collaboration with another organization, in this case UNDP Ukraine, Olena Tarasova, who invited our two speakers to help us rethink what is resilience. They are both experts on the field, coming from the Nordic Urban Resilience Institute, and they did a lot of research on what it actually means. As we know, resilience is quite a buzzword. A lot of people are using it at the moment, and it's being used from being resilient against storms and tide to being resilient to economic pressures, to being resilient against conflict. So it has such a huge and broad meaning, and everybody is using it and misusing the word. So we hope that our two guests can shed some light, explain a little bit more where this term comes from, how relevant it is in general in our cities to think about resilient cities, but at the same time also, of course, relate that to the Ukrainian context. So we have Silvia Haslinger Olsson. She's co-founder of the Institute. Hi, Silvia. She has several years of experience in the field of urban resilience and is co-founder of the Institute. Since 2013, she has been working for the Resilient Regions Association, which is a neutral and independent arena for collaboration on urban resilience. It addresses societal challenges involving politicians, the industry, the private and the public sector, and academia. Previously, she has been working with cluster strategy and innovation at the Regional Development Agency in southern Sweden. Well, there's a lot of difficult words, Silvia. We are very keen on hearing what comes out of all that research and all that experience. Magnus Qvant, our second guest, he's a senior strategist to climate adaptation and resilience in the city of Malmö. Southern Swedish city. He has a special focus on climate adaptation and long-term strategic capacity building in his role for the city of Malmö. Over 10 years of experience at the executive level, I always say that wrong, the executive level in the field of urban resilience, and is co-founder of the Nordic Urban Resilience Institute. He has over 20 years of experience in training and practice in civil security and emergency management, national and internationally. So extremely broad scope as well coming from your side. So without much further ado, I think we should start this conversation, which is indeed a conversation, and we hope you will feel as an audience also engaged to feel part of it. Part of this it will also be a kind of interactive. You will be invited. Our speakers will explain more of that, but invited to really join and participate in this meeting. This is at a time where there are a lot of very topical issues taking place at the moment in Ukraine. So a lot of discussion is being created and formed around lawmaking, about resilience, about transparency and monitoring. So that might pop into the conversation at some point. But let's see where it's all leading to. So please feel free to engage. You can use the Q&A to ask questions specifically about the lecture itself. And later on in the chat, we will post some questions for you to react on, which you can do in the chat as well. So without much further ado, I would like to give the floor to Magnus and Silvia, please.
Sorry.
You have to.
Here we are. I don't know if you can see us both. Yes.
Soon. I'm
Soon,
preparing.
Yeah. We're going to start our presentation directly. We have been introduced and presented, and if there are further questions, we can take it at the end. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and hopefully that will work fine. And I leave over to Silvia to start.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Lilith, thank you for the introduction. I hope it will be clarifying and not confusing you even more about this word, urban resilience. Just like you introduced us, we've been working with this issue for many, many years. And in the beginning, it wasn't a buzzword. We were happy to see it popping up here and there. What we want to do today is not run through the whole sort of semantic discussion on the wordings, but rather to create a common understanding of urban resilience, what it means, and the great benefits that can be harvested by working with this perspective. Okay. So the word resilience is in many disciplines. It's basically used in physics, in psychology. It's constantly referring to the ability of an object or an individual to bounce back from something. My first encounter with resilience was Estee Lauder's multi-effect cream. It's rather expensive. So for me, I had a very flexible relationship to what resilience and actually means. And I was very happy to discover urban resilience. But when we've been working with urban resilience, very often we get the sort of question, how does it differ from sustainability? Sustainability has been around for much longer time, and when resilience emerged, there seemed to be an almost like a conflict. Like, why should we use this when sustainability is already covering what we want to work with? We like this quote very much because it shows that we do indeed have to work with resilience, whereas sustainability strives to work in a world that is in balance. Resilience tries to manage a world that is imbalanced, and that's where we are now. So what we are dealing with is urban resilience. And this is one of many definitions that we like. It's from the Resilient Cities Network, formerly known as 100 Resilient Cities, that been doing great job on pioneering urban resilience worldwide. We will talk about this a little bit later on their organization. You can read the definition here. What we really like to highlight here is the concept of chronic stresses and acute shocks, because that becomes very, very important in the sort of definitions here. And this is the shocks, well, obviously climate change and the tsunamis, wars, these are acute shocks that we can't really never be prepared for, the black swans. But also the chronic stresses is something that all the cities around the world are dealing with. And this is something that we will explain a little bit closer.
Yes, well, we decided from our side already 2010 that there needs to be some kind of definitions. And we said, what is urban resilience when you're talking to a Swede, to us? Our society, we have quite a lot of reputation and a background of working on the concept of functionality. So that became very central for us. So for us, urban resilience is the ability to maintain and renew functionality under pressure. And that is a capacity to be able to do that, actually, regardless whether this pressure comes from chronic or sudden shocking events. And I think many of the shocking events have an aftermath that could be described as a chronic stress to the cities and the regions. But first, the concept of functionality, I think that is important. I think this picture is quite good. Why is Copenhagen biking? As you may know, Copenhagen is the most biking capital city in the world. There is bikes basically everywhere, and I would assume that there are more people getting injured from being hit by a bike rather than from a car in that city. This picture was taken in March 13, 2013, and for most people, this seems a very good question. Why is Copenhagen biking? And the answer is because it is what's functioned the best. Whether you consider to take a car, take the bus, take a train, or tram or trolley, it's never as good as biking, even in this weather condition. But explaining that, the concept of functionality is something that we naturally are drawn to, and that is something that is very important to also to focus on. So, taking that into the city, we were working at the time with the University of Lund with some researchers that was investigating critical interdependencies in critical systems, and they were talking about the electricity grid, and they were interested in study the railway system in Sweden. But we kind of picked up the idea that there are things in society that are independent of each other. If we don't have electricity, we will have problem with our credit cards, we will have problem with our information system, we will not be able to communicate timetables, etc. So there is an interdependency. And we decided to describe the functionality from a flow perspective. And we are talking about 6 urban flows. For those who are interested in EU, it's quite easy to remember because 4 of these flows are the free flows of European Union. That meaning money, people, services, and goods can flow between the member states without any hindering custom or special clearance. We are allowed to travel, we are allowed to buy things in other countries, and we are allowed to import and export goods within European Union without paying any extra custom tax on those things. Then we decided to add information and energy. And we think still these days that by using this perspective of urban flow, it's a very good foundation to discuss the functionality of cities and how you can improve it, how you can maintain it, how you can fix it when it's broken, and how you can make your analysis of risk and pressure on the systems. We made one analysis here in the city of Malmö based on this. We had a workshop where we're discussing who are the operators of these 6 flows. And when we finalized that workshop, we come to the conclusion that 85% of the urban flows are not operated by the city. They are operated by companies. Some companies are owned by the city. It could be electricity, could be the sewage system or the water system or whatever. And it looks different in different places around the globe. But there are many companies that are owned by the cities, and many of the functions are definitely operated by the cities. The municipality are more or less only operating some of the services. It could be schools, it could be healthcare system, and those kind of issues. So why urban resilience? Silvia, sure.
Well, because we have challenges. Those that we mentioned before, the acute shocks, like tsunamis, like the war, like very sort of sudden and striking things. But we also have the chronic challenges. And we have grouped them in the following. We have the new weather, the climate challenge. This includes more cloudbursts. It includes floodings. It includes heat waves in places we never experienced it before. This has, of course, an enormous impact on water scarcity, on the land use, and it's manifesting itself both as a chronic stress, but also acute shocks. The second one that we grouped is urbanization. You've all heard by 2050, 75% of the world's population will live in cities. And of course, people are drawn to cities. That's where you have the possibilities and opportunities. That's where the sort of academia exists and the employment and all the sort of city services. But we also have a rapid urbanization due to wars, conflicts, but also climate change, where people need to move because it's impossible to stay where they are. So people move to cities in an ever-increasing pace, and it poses tremendous demands on our urban area. The third one we mapped or grouped as aging cities. With aging cities, we mean several things, actually. It's that our cities are getting older. Basically, the infrastructure needs to be upgraded. As we said, more people moving in, it requires, more modern systems and more of it. Aging cities refer also to that our inhabitants, the people themselves, are getting older, which means that we are in need of different services, different things that are required for older population. It also puts pressure on the whole system in general. Another interesting aspect that we mapped in the aging cities category is that many of our cities, especially in Europe, they are planned and built during the industrial era. Our cities today look completely different. Not our cities, I mean our demands look completely different today. We do not wish for a place where we have the factory and we work there and then we live in another place. People thrive when they're in a city that has you know, offerings of everything, a mixed city, the 15-minute city. You have different names on what basically a livable city includes. And the fourth one is disruptive technology. It's also a chronic stress on our cities. With disruptive technologies, we mean technologies that are like completely changing our society. For example, energy, by the solar system and solar panels, for example, we can move over to energy supply that is produced and stored and consumed locally. The European Union is having legislation on trying to progress in the energy communities. Actually, Ro3kvit has a very nice lecture on this on the platform that you can look into with Natalie Samovic some months ago. So I will recommend that. Another issue is mobility, that being powered by electricity, but it's also preparing for autonomous vehicles, what kind of pressure that puts on city planning. And of course, the whole digitalization of our society. So basically, urbanization, climate change adaptation, the new weather, aging cities, and disruptive technologies form the very, very, you know, acute need to plan for our cities in a new and more holistic way. Okay. Magnus?
So we're going to continue with some more concrete examples, I think, and then we will open up for questions a bit further on. Copenhagen, the 2nd of July 2011, had a very heavy cloudburst. A lot of rain came in a very short period of time, and that causes a lot of floodings in the city of Copenhagen. And it was a very, very local rain. I live in Malmö, which is just 20 minutes away from Copenhagen, across the bridge over the water between Sweden and Denmark. And we basically had just a very, very little rain shower that day that we could cope with. However, in Copenhagen, it put a lot of critical systems at risk. The mobility system, the public transportation, as well as the logistic situation in Copenhagen was damaged for days before that was up and running. 90,000 damage reports, and what I think is most important now is to understand that there was a huge insurance claims of 900 million euros. But that was not all. Copenhagen was also reporting that the total cost was 1.5 million euros from the cloudburst. And that was an early estimation just a couple of days afterward. And we were asking the city of Copenhagen, what are those 600 million euros? What kind of cost is that? And that are indirect cost. That is cost of being interrupted, not being able to function properly. And later on, Copenhagen claimed that this was not enough. The actual costs of not being functional was much, much larger, perhaps 10 times the total cost when they looked into it in a deeper thing. So I think there are many reasons to embrace this risk analysis and focus on the functionality of city. And that means we are not only talking about the direct damages, we are also talking about the indirect damages that affecting the critical independencies in the urban flows. This is another example. A couple of years later, we had another storm, and you know the storms are named by different names. And this one was called Sven, which is a typical Nordic name. We have a place in Malmö. First of all, we have a train tunnel. There is a tunnel with train tracks going under the city of Malmö that connects the Swedish train system with the European train system. And it operates both local trains for local transportation of people to, for example, between Malmö and Copenhagen, but it also connect international trains from Stockholm to Hamburg and Paris and so on. So it's quite an important place. And the picture you have in front of you right now is the rescue service entrance tunnel to the city tunnel. This is where the firefighters and rescue service personnel could get access to the trains and the tracks via stairs under this concrete and metal construction, which is situated in the middle of the park. At this very storm, the whole park was flooded, and we had a critical incident where we almost had a lot of water flowing down into the city tunnel, threatening the train systems, not only in Sweden, but perhaps also intercontinental, into Europe and Denmark for sure. So this is how it looked before Sven, and this is how it looks today. So then you are thinking, what on earth? Didn't they learn anything? Haven't they taken any measures to prevent this from happening? And there are crisis solutions. A typical thing that when you gather people with crisis management experience, they come up with an idea that we need to have some blue light services coming to the park and put up some kind of defense to protect this entrance. This is a typical way of short-term, fast response. How can we fix this situation in the future? So everyone seems to be quite happy about this one. There were collaboration between the city, the railway agency, and also on regional level, regional administration was involved. For those who are used to storm and perhaps sailing ships and things like that, like me, are become very concerned when you see a construction of this. It takes about 2 hours to put up when the sun is shining, and it's a completely different thing when there is a storm. And we had a storm early this year in the beginning of the year in January, and the whole construction was destroyed by the wind and left the park in the same direction as the wind is blowing. So what if we are thinking, what would it look if we have another way of thinking? What would it look if we had a design solution? How can we embrace these challenges and create co-benefits? And we did a workshop on that. So this is how it looks, and this is how it could look. So with another conceptual thinking of creating something that is built to resist on long term and to be functional every day, not only on demand that the blue light service will respond to, but actually you don't have to do anything at all. You have a solution that will take care of the problem. And in this case, in the park, it will also add some value. Instead of having this metal plate and the basic concrete construction, we could have this more of a nature-based solution, and we could have a wooden deck that is quite comfortable to sit on, comparing to the steel plates. And as you know, a height is always attractive for parents overlooking the children playing, or for young individuals looking for partners. We are always attracted to heights to get a better outsides. Yes, I'm going to step into something else, just to mention that over the years, there are other organizations that also have been looking into the concept of resilience. And one such organizations that we have been in contact with is NATO. NATO has decided 2017 to work on resilience. And there was a really nice quote in the conference 2019. It was stated that resilience is the first line of defense at local level. And I would like to recommend everyone actually to look into the research and the projects that NATO is running on resilience. I think it's very, very relevant these days, not only in Ukraine, but also for us here in the Nordics, where we are rebuilding our civil defense infrastructure at the moment. NATO is looking into this in a wider perspective than you can imagine. First of all, kind of think of it from a war perspective, but they are really putting together knowledge around how to do the risk analysis. They are looking into the critical systems and critical infrastructure systems, and have a kind of a holistic view on this. And first of all, it's also stated in their article number 3. So this is something that really NATO is embracing. It's good for us in Sweden, who is hopefully joining NATO soon if we get a clearance from all the member states. And I think that will also put resilience higher on the agenda in our nations. I was thinking that maybe just to stop a quick moment to see whether we have any questions. I'm looking into the chat, and I think there are something written in a language I don't understand, Ukraine. But please, could any moderator step in to see whether there are questions, or if anyone would like to raise their hand and speak out, do so.
At the moment, not yet. The Ukrainian text was about the translation. So for now, not yet. But I could kick off with a question, or
please do.
Is it a pause in the presentation, or? Okay, then. Because I was triggered in the beginning of your presentation, I think it was Silvia who mentioned, or you, I don't remember, that 85% of the urban flows are actually owned by companies and not by the public sector. That could make it more complicated maybe to deal with that, because then how you regulate that, or how you have influence on that. So what is that conclusion? It kind of struck me, but what is then the effect in what you propose on?
I think there are both difficulties, but there is also opportunities in this. But from our perspective, when we look into this, it seems to be, wherever we come, it seems to be a very similar situation. The only city I know of in Europe, for example, that is completely different is Vienna. Vienna has an organization that is very much of the city services, and many of the flows described in our urban flows are operated by the city. And there are, of course, benefits of that, especially when something happens, then you can move personnel and staff from different sectors to assist in other sectors. However, there are also downsides when it comes to financial issues, when it comes to innovation and development, which sometimes are a bit slow in cities rather than being very progressive as it can be in some of the private sector. But you should also remember that many of these companies are owned by the city or co-owned by the city. So there could be several cities, for example, that owns the electricity company or the energy company. It's not serving one city, but serving several cities. So there is a mixture, and for us, that is just a fact. That means when you want to increase the resilience of your city, it's important to invite and involve also the business sector, those who are operating the cities. And there is a lot of talk in Europe about public-private partnerships, and we need to bring in the private sector into many discussions, research projects, development projects. But for us, the private sector is kind of two of a kind. There are the private sector who operate cities, operating the electricity system, operating the sewage system, or have some kind of long-term responsibility of the functionality of the city. But there is also the private sector that is selling products or selling projects or consultant services that are involved in a project, and when the project is finished, they have no responsibility any longer. So we think it's important to understand this difference and focus on the companies that are operating the cities and have them involved in an early stage when you are doing your resilience analysis, when you are talking about how to increase the system of resilience and how you could help each other. But that is something that needs to be considered, because in many times we think that the city have all the responsibility. But if we think that, we will understand that it's very little that the city itself can affect. But the city has a leadership role towards those providing services and carrying the responsibility of the functionality. Some of those companies are procured by the city or sometimes even by the national government agencies. But sometimes they are operating freely. Take, for example, the food supply. It's in our case, it's private companies that have a store in the city, and it's private company who is operating the logistics. And neither the municipality or the national agency are involved in those, except by regulations, health inspections, etc. But they are not involved in making sure there are food for the inhabitant of the city when there is a crisis, for example. And we can see that over and over again. When something happens, people are hamstering, going to the stores, buying whatever they think they will need for the next week or next 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, all the shelves in the store are empty. And some have managed to get hold of toilet paper, and some are without, or diapers, or pasta, or rice, or whatever it is people are buying. Okay.
And how do you deal with that then? I mean, in the sense the food supply is a good example, I think. So it's in private hands. There is no regulation. So what do you recommend? Should there be a regulation?
I think that is a something. If you have this channel open up with the private sector, if the municipality, if the mayor addresses those companies in the food supply chain, both those who operate the logistic, but also the stores, then you can have an early preparation of taking measures. For example, you could prioritize saying that, okay, you cannot buy all the pastas that we have. You can only buy one packet of pasta, so everyone will get something, or ransonate different things in the store. All that could be prepared and discussed beforehand, which is very good to do, because when you're in the middle of a crisis, it's very difficult to impose those kind of restrictions and regulations and measures. So the idea is to bring them on board, and you will be surprised how they themselves will come up with a solution and ideas of how to solve that. And they will not even ask for money from the local governance, from the mayor, to be able to do that. They realize, okay, we need to take a responsibility for handling that. So an early discussion on what is resilience, what are the risks we are facing, what are the challenges, and what kind of opportunities are there in the situation.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that was a moment of reflection and stop. Let's move on a little bit further. There's some more slides before we're gonna do a little bit of work together. So I would like to talk about the evolution of resilience, just briefly and quickly, because I think it gives a perspective on what we are working with and what we are trying to achieve in the future. For us, it started more or less 2010. It could be that it started earlier, but 2010 is a good starting point for understanding the evolution. At 2010, United Nations decided to work with something they call the Sendai Framework, which was a methodology or focus for the national government to embrace the risk from natural disasters. And it was called the Sendai Framework. It was also the time where UNDP was launching the Making Cities Resilient campaign to create awareness of risks from climate change, but also the risks that are involved of man-made incidents and other natural disasters, etc. It was also the time when Resilient Regions Association was starting up in Sweden, here in southern Sweden, by both the private sector in collaboration with the public sector, and I was part of that from the very beginning. And that is just an example how the NGOs, how something is coming up from the awareness of the fact that we need to work on this, and we need to develop methodologies, and we need to develop knowledge and doing research on the topic. When we were working with Resilient Regions Association, we felt very lonely in the beginning. 2010, there was not many people working on this, and you really had to dive deep into universities to find someone to have a coffee with and a good conversation on this. But 2013, Rockefeller Foundation in United States decided that they should celebrate the 100th anniversary by launching the 100 Resilient Cities initiative, where cities were invited to apply to become a member. And if they did, they will get fundings to finance chief resilient officers, and they will receive support to develop the concept of resilience in their cities and creating a resilience strategy. The goal for the organization was to reach the level of 100 resilient cities within 3 years. And they did. And they did very well on that, and built up a large organization, I would say, to support these cities globally, in Europe, in America, North and South, and in Asia and Africa and Middle East and so on. 2017, as I mentioned, NATO defined the 7 baseline of resilience and decided to collaborate with the civil society on resilience. 2019, they launched a NATO Resilience Conference in Norfolk. Half of the participant was military officer, some with very high level, 4-star generals, but the other half came from the civil society. It was chief resilient officer, it was those working in NGOs and in other organizations in a jointly delivered 2-day conference. It was also when the ICLE conference that was named Resilient Cities made their 10-year anniversary. They have been launching the 10th conference, and they decided that this should be the last one and other initiatives should take on. But it was also a conference that became quite important because it was getting close to the Making Cities Resilient awareness campaigns ending that was supposed to end 2019 as well at the end of the year. So there was a great discussion in this conference, how will we continue working on resilience? And one such outcome of it was that the Making Cities Resilient campaign became later on the Making Cities Resilient campaign 2030. It was also the time where the Rockefeller decided to have their final closing Urban Resilience Summit in Rotterdam, as their initiative had fulfilled its mission. 100 cities had produced their resilience strategies, and the concept of working on resilience have been institutionalized into those cities. And many of them still have their chief resilient officer in place, like Paris, Rotterdam, Greater Manchester, and many, many more. 2020, we have the pandemic, and everything went on virtual meetings like this one. There was a lot of exchange of best practice and discussion on how can cities cope with the pandemic situation. People met from north to south, from east to west, globally. I myself attended a lot of webinars in the middle of the night because they were run in Asia or on the west coast of North America. But that was when really things became what we say glocal. Local governments connected globally to discuss how do we deal with the situation we have at hand. Making Cities Resilient 2030 was launched, and I think this was the boom of the digital meetings, the things that we are still using today. 2021, one of the outcomes from Resilient Cities Conference was the idea of continue with the European Urban Resilience Forum, which was actually a continuation of European Open Days, a small conference that was back-to-back with the Resilient Cities Conference. And it was launched 2020 as a digital one and 2021 as a physical conference here in Malmö, and it was run by ICLE. Oh, sorry. 2022, we have the war on Ukraine from Russia, put a completely new stress on not only Ukraine, but on the whole Europe. It also highlights the resilience from the NATO perspective, that it is utterly important that the civil society is resilient to be able to cope with the stresses, and you know more about that than anyone else. European Urban Resilience Forum took place in Athens and have really established itself as the #1 conference in Europe, or forum, I would say, on resilience. And it was also the time where UNDP and us have the opportunity to invite cities from Ukraine and run a workshop and a session at the conference, which became very impactful on the global society working on resilience, and was quickly picked up by international city networks like Resilient Cities Network, ICLEI, and of course UNDRR, and several more that now would like to be engaged in how do we create a more resilient Ukraine, but also how does the rest of the world learn from the situation at hand. So at the moment, we are also looking into this campaign, Making Cities Resilient 2030. And there's one thing that is so fantastic about this one, and that is that many of the different organizations that earlier have launched their own concept on resilience or have launched their own ideas of how to work on resilience decided to work together under the MCR 2030 as acting as an umbrella for everyone. Before 2020, we could see how even UNDRR and UN Habitat almost competed on different concepts and tools. Now we are connecting them in the same conceptual idea of that this is utterly important to develop a more resilient society. And you can see some of the logos that are core partners and heavily represented in these discussions. And I leave over to Silvia.
Yes, so we tried to squeeze in all this knowledge and all this experience and everything that we've been looking into in the urban resilience sphere. Well, did we manage in 40 minutes? Basically, there is so much best practice, tools, and experiences developed by those organizations that we mentioned and the cities that have been involved in urban resilience planning. And what we have realized during our work and during all those years we've been working on urban resilience is that the tools are there, the best practice is there, but how do we really work with this in the most efficient way? And our conclusion is that it's all about building the capacity within the cities. And this is something that we want to share because this is relevant for all cities. It's relevant for our Swedish cities. It's definitely relevant for Ukraine cities when the recovery process will start and the rebuilding. And our contribution is to inform as much as possible on the learnings, the findings that we've done. And we believe that this is the best way to go forward by basically adopting this urban resilience lens. And we have kind of a plan, but this is the moment when we would like to get your sort of input on something. And our question to you is if you could be so kind and think about it for a while and then maybe write it in the chat. And this is our first question. From a city perspective, what does receiving capacity mean to you? Should we take a little moment for people to reflect? Or Lilith, would you like to discuss something in the meantime?
I am pondering over the question. What does receiving capacity mean to you? And can you?
Should I elaborate a little bit?
Yes.
Well, like we tried to exemplify here with in our presentation, the different organizations and the different perspectives on urban resilience. We believe that the need to truly harvest these best practice and best examples and so on means that the city needs to have a capacity to receive all these networks, the knowledge, the things that have already been worked on in other places. And our theory is that this, but because what we've seen in Ukraine for since this horrible war started is that there are many initiatives from different partners and stakeholders, from larger organizations like Ro3kvit and so on, and everybody is eager to help. But we have seen this even before the war in other places, that there are a lot of solutions and best practices that have been evolved in other cities that have been prone to hazards and shocks and stresses. And what we've seen is that it's not enough with just having a lot of best practice and initiatives, but there is also a need for a receiving capacity to be able to actually know what to ask for in order to really harvest the best solutions. And this is what we would like to elaborate. So we didn't want to say too much but rather if you participants could maybe share what you would think is needed from a city perspective to build up, or how can we ask for the right tools? How can, especially for Ukraine cities, how can we develop this receiving capacity? What does it mean? Do we need it? That's our very broad question.
Okay, let's see if some people put something in the chat as a reception. Olena, I thought you were lost for a moment. Did you translate the question to Ukrainian and tell people they can put it in the chat, right? Great. Okay, that's a nice one. Municipality must be open to the internal changes, not only to have the tools, but be ready to respond flexible in the organizational structure. That makes sense. There are other ideas around?
I think this is an excellent idea that is presented, or perspective. We see quite a lot of hinders from the city organizations to actually work across silos, working across the different departments, and also, of course, work with other cities as well as the private sector outside the municipal organization. So I think being able to be inflexible and when you study what's happening in organizations when there is a crisis ongoing, you can quite easily see how the silos is kind of broken down quickly, and the city is, or the people in the city is reorganizing themselves quickly to be able to cope with the situation at hand. So I think this is a very good one. And the other one is not only municipalities, but also local active communities can receive capacity, but participating tools are important for co-creation on next level. Exactly. When I see this or read this text, it immediately connects with what we call the self-organized society. And what we see is that people who are hit by a shocking situation, whether it's a winter storm or flooding or perhaps even war, they are not only passive victims sitting on the butt and waiting for someone to help. They are actually doing things both to help themselves, but also to help the whole neighborhood. And I think this is something that you also need to embrace. How do we, as a local government, with our crisis management organizations or our organizations to handle risks as well, how do we interact with the civic society? How do we make best use of those self-organizing themselves? 2015, we had a situation here in southern Sweden where a lot of refugees all of a sudden came to our borders and put pressure on the cities. And the first one who responded was the civic society, the self-organized society, who organized shelter, food, clothes, transportation, and even organized how people coming were displaced in private homes, and it did it in an organized way, 24/7, not only the 2 hours after work or something like that, but actually even in the nights and so on.
Do you think we should go for the next question, perhaps, or would we need more time?
Yeah, well, I could add perhaps another reflection from my own side. I think what Silvia was also mentioned, there is a lot of helping initiatives from different organizations that would like to, in a very good and positive way, they would like to offer their assistance and they would like to offer their help. And from a local perspective, not only from the government, but from a local perspective, it can be very difficult to have an overview of what is offered to my city. And of course, also, what do I need the most now in short term, and what do I need on long term or mid or long term assistance? And if I engage my staff, the people in some things, that means they are occupied, and I don't have the capacity to engage into something else that is offered. So you need to pick and choose wisely and in a planned, mannered way. And that is something that might be very difficult when you are there in the crisis, in the situation, and the telephone is ringing and there is a lot offered. There's another reflection here. There should be the floor for experiments and piloting with low responsibility, so that certain small mistakes are allowed before making big decisions.
Very good.
It's very good, yes. I think you can mention it from an innovation perspective, Silvia. Comment on that.
Absolutely. There is something that has been a little bit forgotten, I think, but years ago when I was working with the sort of cluster strategies here in Sweden, the European Union put a lot of effort and resources into creating what they called the white fields or the white spaces. And that was aiming to basically try out new business areas, new ways of connecting different disciplines and different businesses. It was a very good intention, and it resulted in a lot of interesting new products and services. But I think it developed into something called smart specialization that became rather a competitive state than just this kind of sharing knowledge. It became more of a quest to find financing and so on by being very specialized rather than the intention was, and that was to create something new in the white spaces by taking an old industry and mix it with another one. But we really much like this this sort of floor of experiment, and this is something that is going hand in hand with urban resilience, and this kind of arena platform thinking of having different disciplines, different stakeholders to co-create. Like we say, if you only bring rescue services, you will get one solution. But if you take designers, urban planners, artists, different disciplines into the room, you get a completely different solution. We've been inspired quite a lot of Copenhagen. I think they've been doing a lot of interesting things, and they actually had something interesting called the F-up sessions, not politically correct word, but basically a get-together, a platform for local, but also politicians and civil servants who would share ideas that maybe didn't work out, or things that they imagined, could work, but maybe didn't work because something was not in place. And so we really much like this arena for this type of experiments and thinking, where you don't just meet up to show sort of what you've been great at doing, but rather putting your challenges on the table and be honest about that. Look, we are, striving with doing this. Do you have some good practices from? Yeah.
And I think also when we are addressing the challenges that was described earlier by Silvia, from climate change and from disruptive technologies, a lot of those challenges contains what is normally called or mentioned as black swan. With that, there are something that is happening that we don't have any experience of before, or that we couldn't imagine the magnitude of the what is happening. And I think the cloudburst for Copenhagen was such an event that no one was really able to foresee the impact of that cloudburst. We have 2018, we had a heat wave here in Sweden, and twice as many were killed from the heat wave during 12 weeks than is annually killed by road traffic accidents in Sweden. And that is also a way of not being able to foresee the effect of the crisis, the event, or the pressures. And to be able to handle that, you cannot go back to your old toolbox, your old experience, because there is nothing in that fits. So then you need to experiment, then you need to innovate, and you need to test and try out new ways of handling the situations.
We have a new input.
You can indeed forward to the second question.
Yeah, I think we will. There is a last one. Based on the situation in Ukraine, we must remember the limitation of the war. There is no constant electricity and internet, psychological exhaustion, and it's difficult to assess the negative impact. Indeed, right on, spot on. And I think this is something that we need to evaluate, we need to learn from, we need to understand deeper. And then we need to innovate and discuss how can we build a more resilient society towards the stress from a war, so we could be more resilient. As NATO is explaining, we need to have the first line of defense is urban resilience. We need to be able to cope not only with the effects of the war, because if we cannot cope with a shortage of electricity under milder constances like winter storms, etc., then we have, of course, we'll have trouble when someone is deliberately trying to knock out the electricity grid system. And that's why we, for example, are thinking that in the future we will see systems where where cities are supplied with electricity from local production, local storage to consume locally. It is mentioned from Stanford University as the future of electricity, based on that anything else will be too expensive. The loss in the transportation costs too much, and the investment in transport electricity is too expensive. But it is also a system that make your city more resilient and make the nation more resilient towards these kind of effects on the electricity grid. More places where electricity are produced, the likelihood that the whole country, the whole city is on a blackout is less in those cases. So it's very relevant from a resilience perspective. We could have another session on just these issues, I guess.
Should we go on with
I think we have another question as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it for you, Silvia.
what happened now? Okay. So the next question we had is, what is needed to build this capacity for resilient and sustainable recovery? Maybe we have already touched upon it, but it will give you more time to reflect.
Yeah, I think that was indeed touched upon in the suggestions already done for the first question, like how to build a system like that, and how to indeed receive this.
General questions.
Yeah, I think that you know, we didn't know how active our participants would be. Let's use this time. We still have a moment, I guess, to reflect on this, or if you have other questions related to this or our presentation. So
En slide till vi kan bara. Vi kör den sen så.
Yeah, but let's see if du får ta den.
Maybe Marco, you have something from the Ukrainian point of view in.
Jag kommer passa bara det du får göra.
Okay, let me take the last slide, and then we can open the floor for any type of questions or any type of discussions together. I don't know whether participants are allowed to raise their hand and speak as well. Hopefully they are, if they want to.
Yes, definitely. We will bring them into
then we open the floor for everyone. So Silvia and I, we are working on a pre-study and a project together with the UNDP, and we have a plan, so to speak. We have a plan that we need to build capacity within Ukraine cities to handle the future in a resilient way, and to be able to connect with what's going on in Europe and in the network of cities. So we think it's utterly important that the future planning or the rebuild of Ukraine cities, but also the transformation of our other European cities we're working on in Sweden, that it should be built on principle of how to create resilient cities and sustainable city. That meaning, of course, we are trying to look into energy system with fossil-free fuels. Solar and wind are on the topics, and there is a discussion whether nuclear plants are beneficial as well. We think that we need to connect with the umbrella of MCR 2030 and the partners. It is actually a great initiative, and what makes it great is many things, but foremost, we think that all the partners, important partners, that is providing assistance and facilitating the development is great. It's also a place where many cities are gathered for changing best experience and form consortium where they jointly go into development programs, could be financed and hosted by the EU Commission, but there is also other initiatives outside those financial streams. And we think that it would be great to connect Ukraine cities in this one as well. We think there needs to be a discussing on how to build receiving and absorptive capacity. It is longed for from many organizations outside, and in my former work, when I was working with crisis management training programs, I know that we were involved in many programs delivered by either EU or United Nations on training organizations to deliver help in crisis situations. So, for example, the civil protection mechanism within European Union, we trained so they could go anywhere in the world and deliver. And when they came back, we evaluated, and they say, well, we can deliver, but we are not sure that those who are in the crisis can receive what we can deliver. And we need to adjust the systems in both ends. We need to build a receiving capacity. And I think in this case with Ukraine, it's not only about receiving the immediate need of health, but it's actually also linked with preparing Ukraine to be linked with the EU system, with the networks of European cities. So Ukraine cities could actually benefit from, for example, the Horizon and the mission projects that are huge projects launched within the EU to build climate adaptation capacities. We think it would be very beneficial to build resilient strategies. It's not only that it's actually a good strategy and plan to be able to develop your society, in this case, rebuild your society, but it's also actually proven to be a very useful tool to link finance with. If you have a resilient strategy and you can link your different projects to this long-term strategy, it is much easier to create bankable projects and projects that investors would like to invest in, but also donors who would like to put the money into those projects. So I think the resilient strategy is very helpful in many ways as well. And of course, we need to be able to take immediate actions, but they need to be in line with the long-term strategies. So if we are providing cities with new roofs at the moment, when we're taking these immediate actions, we need to consider whether those roofs also could be coupled with solar panels to provide electricity at the same time, and other co-benefits. And of course, they should be built in a way so when the war finally ends, we can go in and build a more solid and long-term transformation of those houses and real estate facilities as well. So we are thinking that Ukraine cities should establish a neutral, city-driven and facilitated platform so they could create some kind of resilient regions, Ukraine, where cities are collaborating and actually get together to build capacity to link in with all the assistance and all the different helping organizations that is actually willing to assist in different ways. I think that has come to the end of our presentation, Silvia, don't you? And let's see what pops up, and
Yeah, we have
please
questions and
raise your hand to have a
there is
vocal
Thank you.
well,
A lot of information you gave us. There's indeed a question, Tatjana. I tried to bring you in as a panelist. Does that work? Okay, then we'll just read it from the Q&A. Can also have to do with the connection that is a bit unstable. So could you elaborate a little bit on what insights were most useful or unexpected to the EU Resilience Network based on your experience in Ukraine?
well, I think when we had Vinnytsia, Rivne, and Irpin represented at the URESFO conference in Athens, they made an amazing impact when they were presenting the different sort of challenges, but also the work they've been done. And I think the community has been very moved. Sorry, it's just a simple alarm. 2 seconds. Sorry about that.
We don't hear anything. It's good.
Okay, very good. So basically, I think we are all moved by the resilience within the inhabitants, the Ukrainians themselves, and the ability to work through all the challenges on an everyday basis. That was very impactful. But it was also very impactful to show that there has been a lot of progress and city plans already in place. I mean, we had great people that were there presenting the sort of city plans that they had already started, that had sustainability in mind, and working on green solution and nature-based solutions. And I think that was also surprising. I think a lot of people in the community didn't expect that so much work had already been done. And impressed by that fact. It was also impressive and very moving to see that even though all these damages that are happening constantly, the city planners already had in mind of rebuilding and in the middle of this chaos, still trying to think about sustainable solutions. And I think that's the most astonishing, that remaining so positive and proactive about the future. But what I think what's astonishing for us all also is the fact that this is what we're getting back to again, all those initiatives in Ukraine that makes it probably a little bit difficult, because there is so much goodwill and there's so many initiatives, and it's quite hard for the city planners to deal with the everyday issues during this unbelievable situation, and at the same time keeping track of everything that is out there. So that would be my elaboration on. I don't know if that's the answer.
No, and what I think we could add to that is that, as Silvia mentioned now, the impression that was so strong was how you cities in Ukraine are still having all your ambition city plans based on nature-based solutions, etc., and they are kept alive, even though the situation is very stressful at the moment. And I think that is utterly important to nourish that situation, that kind of ambition, to keep it alive, because it's something that will speed up the process when we finally could go all in for the recovery process after the war. To have these plans updated, have these ambitions, the energy, and that keep that alive, is really something that people were talking about a lot after the conference when we have met them in online and physically and so on.
Diana, is that answering your question? I see you're present now. And I see Marco has her hand raised.
Так, дякую. Я буду говорити
Yes, thank you
українською.
very much. I will talk in Ukrainian because I am in the Ukrainian channel. Yes, and there will be a translation of that. So in general, in Ro3kvit, we believe that we must come together so that we could spread the skills, the competences, not to duplicate the work of each other, but rather to scale up common conclusions and results. So my question will be how to adapt the things that you have mentioned to context, a specific context. Are they universal? Are they all-purpose solutions? Because today Ukraine has a brilliant chance, a unique chance of reconstruction, of starting anew, starting afresh. So how can we use this chance? The chance?
Yes, it's a very relevant question.
When we have so many opportunities. So once again, how can we use this chance when we have so many opportunities? What would you suggest? Are your solutions context-based or are they all-purpose solutions?
We could open the floor for anyone to answer that one, of course. Silvia and I can give our reflection. And first of all, we have realized that the damages to Ukraine cities are not equally distributed. Of course, there are some parts that are more heavily damaged than other parts of Ukraine. And that's a difference in the needs, etc. But it's also a capacity that already exists within Ukraine. Those in less needs could help those in bigger needs, of course. But I think also it's a reflection about that there will be different measures in different parts of Ukraine. There are some places where there needs to be construction work to rebuild roads, the infrastructure, buildings, etc. And in other places, there is perhaps only minor fixing, but there might be other issues. Many refugees from other parts of Ukraine have went to these places and put pressure, etc. I think the answer to the question is both yes and no. There are some kind of universal perspective when it comes to how to organize and the processes, doing their risk analysis, doing their analysis of challenges, understand the functionality, build organization, financing, put in place some planning, etc. Those procedures might be universal, even though the concrete measures will be different in different places, as they are. So they are in Sweden. We are coping with some weather issues here in southern Sweden that is completely different in the northern Sweden, north of the North Pole, where the temperature at this very minute is below -30, while we are comfortably around 0 in the south. So of course, it's the same in Ukraine, that whether you are on the east and west and south and north, there are differences, but similarities might be in some universal processes. And I think the MCR 2030 has demonstrated that. I think the 100 Resilient Cities Network have demonstrated that, where a small city in Denmark, Vejle, with 100,000 inhabitants, actually could collaborate with Rio de Janeiro, with millions inhabitants, and realizing that the challenges are the same, and it's only a difference in scale from neighborhood to the big cities of Rio de Janeiro.
Thank you a lot.
Yes, thanks. I think we should be closing down a little bit. It's 6:30 already. People so will need to get some other foods than just food for the brain, and start going to the dinner tables. Thank you so much for being here and giving all these insights in how to become resilient, and presenting your plan to do that for the Ukraine. Much appreciated. Thank you, UNDP, again for the collaboration on this and bringing these visions to us. And hope to see you again soon. For all the attendees who are still here, we would like to announce that we're going to present a discussion on the just presented new law in Ukraine, probably next week on the Thursday, but stay tuned on our different channels to find more details about that, because we are formulating that as we speak at the moment. So follow our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, and others, and on our website, of course. And here you can reach our speakers of tonight. So you can also follow that. So thanks again, both of you, and hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Дякуємо всім, що сьогодні були з нами, нашим партнерам з ПРООН.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, UNDP. Thank you, International Renaissance Foundation. Thank you, dear lectors. And see you. We have many more lectures for you. Bye-bye.